Imagine you just got a house for a good price, and then later on finding out why you got that house for that price. What's up, cousins? So I'm back with another story time. Make sure you guys engage with the story times that I already have posted. But just like any other time, let's not waste no time and let's get into it. Okay, so for this story, we're going to call him Joe. Now, Joe really didn't believe in the whole paranormal thing because he said that he lived in the hood, and in the hood, it really wasn't a thing. Or if it was a thing, it wasn't made to be a thing. His parents ended up finding this big house for a really, really good price, and they did not want to pass up on the deal, so they ended up renting out this house. So at this point, Joe's excited because it's a big house. So he ended up telling his friend, like, hey, this is the house he's moving into. He ended up showing him the house. His friend looked at him and was like, you know this house is haunted, right? So Joe looked at him and was like, yeah, right. You know, not believing it. So his friend is like, no, for real. Like, an old white man used to live here. He died in this house, and people say the house is haunted. His friend also said anyone that moved into that house hasn't stayed more than a couple months because everything that went on inside the house. So Joe is still not believing what he's saying because he said his friend is always joking around with him, so he thought this was another joke. So fast forward, now they're in the process of moving all of their things in the house. So Joe, his sister, and his brother started exploring the house and picking their rooms. Joe ended up picking a room that had no windows. So next, Joe's sister picks her room, which is straight down the hall. They go in the room, check the room out. They notice that it's a floor-length mirror with no frame bolted into the wall. They all go back to Joe's room because he's like moving his clothes in, moving his stuff in. They're just chit-chatting while he's moving everything in his room. Now, mind you, it's only Joe, his sister, and his brother in the house at this time. The mom is not there. So as they're in Joe's room, helping him unpack and put things up, they hear a loud-ass noise in his sister's room. All three of them go run to his sister's room. No one's there. And remember, the way the house is set up, her room is at the end of the hall, which means if anyone came in or left, they would have seen them. Now, there's absolutely nothing in his sister's room at the time because they're still moving in, except that mirror. So now all three of them looking at each other like, what just happened? Because the noise was the mirror being shattered. So a couple hours later, the mom comes home. She checking all the rooms. She noticed that the mirror in the sister room is shattered. So she immediately gets upset and started yelling, asking what happened to the mirror. So they just like, we didn't do nothing to the mirror. So the mom is like, y'all did something to this mirror. Y'all probably was in here play fighting and broke the mirror. So Joe's telling his mom, like, we all was in my room. We heard a loud noise. We went and checked on it. The mirror just shattered. So the mom looking at them like, be for real. So the sister and brother is backing Joe up like, no, he's not lying. That's really what happened. The mom sees how serious they are, and she starts to kind of believe them. So fast forward, some time goes by. Joe ended up inviting one of his friends over to have a sleepover and play the game. So we're going to call him Zach. So Zach comes over, Zach and Joe get on the game, and they spend a couple hours on there. So hours go by, they get tired. So Zach ended up going to get his sleeping bag, and he fell asleep at the end of Joe's bed. So the next day comes. When they wake up, Zach told Joe, hey, I saw a ghost in here last night. Joe said he immediately believed Zach when he told him he saw a ghost. Although Joe never physically seen anything, he said he did go through some unexplainable things. So Joe asking Zach, like, hey, what exactly did you see? What happened? So Zach said he was asleep and he had the feeling that somebody was standing by him. So he said once he woke up, it was a girl bent over looking at him. Because remember, he fell asleep on the floor. So she's like bent over, looking dead at him. So Joe's asking, well, how did you see her? Because when you turn off all the lights, remember, it's pitch black. So he said whatever she was wearing, her shirt or whatever it was, had a glow to it. So Joe was asking Zach, well, how did her face look? So Zach is like, well, I don't know, because as she's bending down, her hair is covering her face. So at first, Zach didn't think nothing of it because he thought it was Joe's sister sneaking in the room trying to play a prank on him. Zach said he realized that it wasn't Joe's sister when he tried to touch her face, and the lady stood up and walked back into the wall. He then got up and went into the corner of the wall that she went into, and nothing was there. So ever since that situation happened, Joe now sleeps with a nightlight in his room so it's not completely dark whenever he closes his door. So one particular night, Joe's in his bed sleeping, and he feels something pushes him from underneath the bed. And he said he's a really light sleeper, so it woke him up. So he ended up going back to sleep. Now, this happened a couple more times, and when he woke up, he was confused because he didn't know whether he dreamt that or whether he really felt that. Joe gets up again. He turns the light on. He looks under the bed. Nothing's there. So he's kind of confused as he don't know whether he was dreaming it or it really was happening. So Joe got back in the bed. He went back to sleep. Now, this time when he felt the push from under the bed, it pushed him so hard to where he lifted off the bed and then came back down. That freaked him completely out. Not only did that just happen, the bed then starts to shake. Joe said he got so fed up, he ended up telling whatever this is, if you're going to unalive me, do it now. He said ever since he said that, nothing happened for a long time. Until, so months go by of no activity happening to Joe. So this particular day, he goes out with his friends, he's day drinking, he's having a good time. They drop him back off at home. Joe said he goes to the house, make sure his sister, brother, mom was or wasn't there. No one was home. He then goes into the living room and just started to chill out and watch a little TV. As he's sitting there watching TV, his whole body from his head to his feet go paralyzed. He can't talk, he can't move, he can't scream because he says he's trying to scream and he can't. Joe said the only thing he could move was his eyes. So he's just stuck on this couch and he cannot move his head or anything. He just moving his eyes. He said it felt like a force of energy came across him and boom, he was paralyzed. As he's laying there on the couch and he cannot move, he said he heard footsteps coming from his room down the hallway. Joe said as he's hearing these footsteps, he feels a presence standing behind him, but he can't even move his head to even look and see, but he feels something behind him. In that moment, he blacked out. So when he came back, he did not know how long he was out for. He said the sun was still up, but then he realized he could move his body. He got up and ran out of the house. He never went back to that house. If you guys have any stories that you want me to share, okay, do not hesitate. Send it to my DM, send it to the email that's in my bio, either or. Until next story time, y'all, enjoy this one. Like, comment, repost, reshare. Give me your opinion.
In 2015, they went to a school camp at an old Australian recreation center, and they were having fun until it turned into a literal nightmare. When I was 10 years old, back in 2015, my school went on a camp to an old recreational center in a small town in New South Wales, Australia. To this day, it remains one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, and I've never gone on another school camp since. Before we went on camp, we knew it was haunted because the older students had stories about it. The camp itself was very old. It had once been a boys' school many decades ago. The girls and boys slept in separate buildings. In the girls' section, there were 5 rooms, each with 4 girls. The building was very old, with brick walls, old curtains, and a bathroom downstairs that was scary. Everyone hated going down there alone. The second night of camp was horrible. We were woken by terrified screams from the girls. We came out to see teachers running to the rooms while the girls were crying. A large rock had smashed through one of the bedroom windows and shattered everywhere. It was unexplainable. The camp was fenced off and locked. No strangers could have entered, and all the students were monitored by teachers. One of the girls in that room, who I'll call Lucy for privacy reasons, was especially shaken. I remember she was a lovely girl. I did gymnastics with her, and she was very outgoing. However, that night, something about her changed. She barely spoke for the rest of the camp and became very cold and sheltered, which at first we thought was because she was still scared from what had happened. A day later, our group was down by the lake when I cut my toe and had to return to the rooms with the teacher to get some supplies. The building should have been empty as everyone else was outside. But as we walked through the hallway, we both heard footsteps moving through the bedrooms above us. The teacher suddenly stopped walking and looked at me. "You can hear that too, can't you?" I nodded. Then a vase from a shelf in the living room flew off and smashed onto the floor. At that exact moment, another teacher walked in. The look they exchanged is something I still remember. Neither of them said a word, but both looked genuinely frightened. I was immediately sent back outside. That night, things became even stranger. One of the girls, Emily, was moved into my room because she was too scared to stay with Lucy. She told us that after everyone had gone to bed, Lucy had started making strange noises. She started growling. The girls told her to stop, and eventually it went quiet. A few hours later, Emily woke up to Lucy standing at the window completely still. Emily thought she was trying to scare everyone, so she told her to stop it because it wasn't funny. But Lucy turned around, and Emily swears that what looked back at her wasn't Lucy at all. She said her face looked wrong, and then she smiled and began laughing. But it wasn't a girl's laugh. Emily described it sounding like a grown man. So Emily ran straight to the teachers. On the second to last night, all the girls were headed downstairs to the bathrooms when Lucy suddenly shoved another girl down the stairs, causing her to break her ankle. Everyone was horrified because Lucy wasn't a bully. She wasn't violent. She would have never done something like that. Yet she showed no emotion afterward. That same night, her parents arrived and took her home. When we returned to school, Lucy was completely different. She became angry, disruptive, and withdrawn. She wasn't the person she was before. She eventually moved away. When I got home from camp, my mom was helping me unpack when she stopped. She asked me to turn around because across my back were dark bruises and some of them were red handprints. I have no idea where they came from, but it was scary as hell. Anyway, after writing this email out, I decided to search the camp up online, and that's when I found an article about how a priest had supposedly visited it in 2024 to put demons at rest because of reports of strange activity there, which is not a surprise to me. The center was an institution for troubled boys. I think back to it and wonder why it was allowed to be open to schools, especially when it was still operating today, and sometimes I wonder if Lucy is okay. It's crazy that it took like 10 years almost for a priest to come and try to get rid of the demons at this place. This is absolutely terrifying, and I hope Lucy's okay. I hope she's not possessed, because sure damn sounds like it. So much for submitting this story. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. I will see you in the next one.
Do you guys want to hear a scary story? This one is definitely going to keep you up tonight, so if it's nighttime, save this for later. For a quick context, I used to babysit for an extremely haunted house. 2 girls in the house. The oldest one I call Luna, the youngest one I call Aura. Not the real names, just identity to protect them. Now, Luna and Aura, mostly Luna, had imaginary friends in that home that were actually demonic entities, and that is where these experiences come from babysitting in that home for so long. Now, of course, this happened a long time ago, so Luna and Aura, they've grown up a little bit. This is a story Luna just recently told me that happened to her regarding Bathsheba. If you're new to my stories, we call this entity Bathsheba because she looks just like Bathsheba from the 2013 Conjuring, pretty much down to a dot. So Luna and Angel decide they're gonna stay with Angel's sister. We're gonna call Angel's sister Jay. Her older sister lives up there and had told the girls, I'd rather you stay here, it's a little bit more safe, and like I have a big house, so why don't you just stay with me? So Luna's all excited, her and her friend are excited. They drive up, they're having fun with their friends. And the whole time Luna tells me she has this unsettling feeling of almost dread, but she can't really describe it as they're driving up there. But she brushes it off and they're having fun with their friends. They're going out to dinner, they're walking around downtown, just having a good time. Now, Jay, the sister, is a firm believer, which I am too. Apparently she's a firm believer and nothing good happens after midnight. That's a life rule to live by, guys. So she didn't per se have a curfew for the girls, but they're still not, you know, that old. They're still teenagers and stuff. And so she was like, hey, out of respect for my house, like, you know, I'm not super strict like my mom and dad, but I don't want you guys out all night, so please just make sure you're coming home. I don't remember if it was by like 1 or 2 or something like that. Just be respectful. And the girl's like, yeah, of course, we'll be home then. So apparently around 1 or something, the night that they're supposed to have like this loose curfew, Angel gets a text from Jay, and Jay is like, hey, I'm getting really tired. I would really appreciate it. Like, if you girls came home soon, it would make me be able to sleep a lot better. I'm just a little worried. So they're like, yeah, okay. They come home, I guess, about 30 minutes later. And when they get home, the lights are off, except for the porch light out front. And it's quiet. So they think, okay, Jay is sleeping. So they're being all goofy and giggly, you know, walking into the house, and they're trying to be quiet, and they're laughing and trying to cover their mouths. Now, Luna did tell me she's partying, okay? She's young, so maybe she wasn't in her best state of mind at the time. They were just having a really fun time. And apparently, Angel tells her, okay, here's the game plan. I'm gonna walk past, or go in Jay's room, or walk past if her door is open, see if she's sleeping. And if she's sleeping, then maybe we can have a couple more drinks. But if she's awake, she's not gonna let us, or something like that, you know? And Luna's like, okay, I'm gonna go check the fridge real quick. So they disperse. Luna heads to the fridge, and she said the whole house was dark, and she didn't want to really turn on any lights because she was trying to be respectful. So she's feeling her way around, trying not to bump into anything. And she said she accidentally entering the kitchen kind of bumps into the island, and it makes a tiny noise because there's keys or something on the counter. And out of her peripheral vision, all of a sudden, she sees a person standing in the open pantry. But it's, you know, pitch black. She said she sees someone, she swears, out of the corner of her eye in the pantry, and she gets a bad feeling. She doesn't like it. She doesn't think it's Jay just hiding in the pantry, but she's like, maybe Angel's trying to scare me or something. And then she decides to think, I'm just being crazy. I'm not my best mindset right now. Like, let's check for drinks. So she said she's walking over to the fridge, and which is not like far from the entrance of the kitchen, but it is at the same time you have to kind of walk around to get to the fridge. Quick context, you will need to know this. Jay, the older sister, this is important, loves coffee. Apparently she drinks coffee at all hours of the day, night. It doesn't really keep her up. She just really likes the taste of it. She enjoys it. So remember that. Luna then is in the fridge and she's got her phone light. She says she's trying to be, because I guess the light was out in the fridge too. Weird. She's trying to be quiet, and then she swears she hears someone breathing a little heavily, but she can't pinpoint where it's coming from. And then she hears coffee behind her. Now, she didn't immediately look back, because as she hears this, she's still looking for drinks for her and a friend. So she's kind of moving things around the kitchen. Like, she stops and said she looks like up, but not behind her. And she was like, Jay? And it was quiet, because it would make sense that it was Jay if it was, because she always drinks coffee. No matter what. That was weird. And so anyways, she says it again, Jay. Nothing. It's silent. And then she hears to the right, and to the right, where she's looking in the fridge, was coffee creamer. Now, she starts to get scared. She doesn't want to look behind her, she tells me, because this voice is raspy. It doesn't sound like Jay, and she can just feel the energy is off. So she starts hearing the breathing intensify. Sounds like someone's wheezing. She gets the courage, she turns around. Right as she turns around, her friend Angel walks in the kitchen, and she stifles a scream. She's like, oh my God, like, you scared me, like, oh, sorry, you freaked me out. Where'd Jay go? Does she still want coffee? And Angel's looking at her, and she was like, what do you mean, does Jay still want coffee? Jay's sleeping. Jay's passed out. I just went to her room and saw. Luna starts to get that bad feeling creeping back. She's trying to stifle it. The girls grab some stuff from the kitchen, and they start walking back to the bedroom they're staying in. Now, I think it was a 2-bedroom house, she had said. The bedrooms are on one side of the hallway, though, and the bathroom and, like, the laundry maybe, I don't know, it's on the other side. Bedrooms are on one side. So in order to get to the bedroom that the girls were staying in, Luna and Angel, they had to go all the way to the back and pass Jay's bedroom. Now, Jay, her door was open, Angel said, when she went to check on her, and she's passed out, right? So as the girls are walking past the room, in order to get to theirs, Luna just takes a really quick peek in the room and takes another peek and screams. She can't help it, she starts screaming. Apparently, as she walks past the room, Jay had one of those in the corner of her room, like chairs that, it's like a stand and then it hangs with like the cushion, if you know what I'm talking about, like those comfy looking chairs in the corner. And Luna swears on everything. As she walked by, she sees Bathsheba sitting in that chair, eyes wide like this, with something in her hand that looks like a coffee mug. And her eyes are wide, and she's smiling ear to ear as she walks past it. Now, she said the house was pitch black, but she could just somehow see the defining features of this entity, and she swears that she knew what she was seeing. Obviously, when she screams, Jay shoots out of bed. She freaks out. She wakes up. Angel's freaking out. They're trying to figure out how to help her, because apparently, rightfully so, Luna is distraught because she was very afraid of Bathsheba. She had not seen Bathsheba in years, and she said it looked just like her. Now, she does think this could possibly be just a different entity trying to mess with her and take the form of something that is terrifying to her. But I guess that Jay and Angel were great about it. The next day they talked to her about it, and Jay had told her, yeah, I have seen some scary things in this house that I can't explain. You're not crazy. We're here for you. We believe you. So next time you are talking in the kitchen at night to something, make sure it's actually a person, because it just might be something from the other side trying to get to you. Here's the last kicker I forgot to add before I say bye and wrap this up. Apparently, Jay lost her favorite coffee mug the night the girls came over and hasn't been able to find it since. So could it possibly be that that's what Bathsheba was holding and is hiding somewhere? That's all I have for now. Bye.
One evening, a teenage girl came home from school and she found the house empty. Her mother had left a sticky note on the fridge. It said her father was working late, her mother was out shopping, and her younger brothers were at soccer practice.
Okay.
She was alone in the house. The girl locked the front door just in case. Then she put her mobile phone on the hall table, hung her keys on a hook, and went upstairs to her bedroom to change clothes. As she was getting undressed, she saw a sticky note on her bed. She picked it up and looked at the message. It read, there's someone in the house.
Absolutely
Oh,
not.
my God.
Please.
Jumping straight out the
I'm
window.
already,
I'm already gone.
Yeah.
She assumed it was her younger brothers playing a trick on her, so she crumpled up the note. Very funny, guys, she said. What happened? Did you two miss soccer practice? No one answered. I know you're here, she yelled. If I find out you two went through my stuff again, you're dead. The girl went downstairs to the kitchen to fix herself a snack. When she opened the fridge, she saw another note. It read, there's nobody here but you and me.
Oh, please.
She dropped the note and said, hey guys, this isn't funny anymore, stop it. There was no answer. The girl went to the front door and tried the knob, but it was locked. She turned around to get her keys, but the hook she'd hung them on was empty. Then the girl glanced down at the hall table and saw that her mobile phone had disappeared as well. On the table, there was another sticky note. It read, you're not going anywhere.
Oh, absolutely not.
Bye, bitch! I'm going.
Absolutely, I'm out.
She picked the phone up to call the police, but there was no dial tone. She grabbed the phone line, and to her horror, she realised it had been cut. There was another note lying by the phone. It read, no phone, no police, no way out.
Oh my shitting God.
Trembling with fear, the girl ran to the back door. When she tried to turn the handle, she found it was also locked. Just then, she spotted another note stuck to the back door. It read, look up.
I'm like this the whole time. No. I would never look up.
I'm not even moving.
I would never look up.
I'm never looking up again.
You can't make me.
So she looked up and saw her pet cat,
Oh,
speared
my God.
through the heart and pinned to the ceiling.
Don't fuck with the cat.
It's not on really, is it?
Hey.
She screamed in terror and ran to the nearest window. She tried punching and kicking it, but she couldn't smash the glass. It wouldn't even crack. There was a sticky note on the window. It read, you can't catch a break, can you? The frightened girl desperately tried to think of what she should do. She needed a knife to defend herself. She ran to the kitchen, but when she pulled out the drawer, it was empty. All of the knives were gone, and in their place was another sticky note.
Another
Shit.
fucking post-it.
It read, children shouldn't play with sharp things.
Oh, God.
She ran upstairs to her bedroom and locked the door. She checked inside the closet and under the bed. There was nobody there. She breathed a sigh of relief. Then all of a sudden, her TV turned on by itself.
God.
Oh, for fuck's
It
sake.
was loud and static, and on the screen she found another note. It read, now I have you where I want you. The girl flew into a panic and started yelling and screaming, help, help, someone help me! Just then she remembered her laptop. She flipped open the lid and quickly sent an email to her best friend. Help, this is not a joke. Call the cops. There's someone in my house. Minutes later, she heard the sound of sirens outside. The police arrived and broke down the front door. 2 officers burst into her bedroom and found her cowering in the corner, shaking and quivering with fear. The police searched the entire house from top to bottom, examining every nook and cranny, but they found no one. As the officers were interviewing her, one of them spotted
A sticky note.
a sticky note attached to her back.
Saying what?
He pulled it off and handed it to her.
What does
It read,
say?
I was this close. Is everyone
Oh
okay?
my
No.
God.
No, absolutely
no,
not.
I'm very
No,
traumatised.
Absolutely
That's
not.
horrible, isn't it?
I'm
Isn't that
very
horrible?
traumatized.
My neighbor asked me if the man in my dream had found the basement door yet. This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about how my neighbor knew about the nightmares I was having. I barely knew the woman who lived across the street from me. Her name was Diane, and she was probably in her late 60s. We waved if we were both outside, and once she bought a package over that had been delivered to her house by mistake, but that was it. So when she stopped me one morning when I was taking out the trash, I thought she was going to ask me about the garbage schedule or something normal, but instead she looked at me for a second and said, "Did you sleep okay?" I thought that was a weird question, but I said yes, and she didn't look like she believed me. And then she said, "Did he find the basement door yet?" I just stared at her. I asked what she meant, and she looked back towards my house and then said, "The man in your dream." I felt my stomach drop because I had been having the same nightmare for almost 2 weeks. I never told anyone about it because it didn't seem worth mentioning. It was creepy, but it was just a dream. In the dream, I was standing at the top of my basement stairs. The lights were off downstairs, but I could hear someone moving around below me. Not walking exactly, more like someone dragging one foot behind them. and then a man would appear at the bottom of the stairs. I could never see his face. He would just stand there in the dark with one hand on the railing. Every night he was one step higher, and that was the part that bothered me. The first night he was at the bottom, the next night he was on the second step, and then the third, and then the fourth. I always woke up before he reached the top. So when Diane asked if he had found the basement door, I couldn't answer. I finally said, "How do you know about that?" And she didn't seem surprised. She just looked tired. She said, "He used to stand at mine." I asked her who, and she said she didn't know. And then she asked how many steps he had made it up. I should have walked away right then, but I told her. I said he was about halfway up, and Diane nodded slowly and said, "Don't let him get to the top." I tried to laugh because I wanted the conversation to feel less insane. I asked how I was supposed to stop someone in a dream, and she said, "Stop opening the door." I told her I wasn't opening anything, and she said, "You are. You just don't remember it when you wake up." And then she picked up her empty trash can and went back inside. I stood there on the curb for a long time. I wanted to tell myself she was messing with me, but Diane didn't seem like the type to play jokes. And she said she had known about the basement. She had known about the man. And that night, I tried not to sleep. I stayed on the couch with every light on and played videos on my phone until my eyes started burning. And at some point, I must have dozed off. I dreamed I was at the basement door again, only this time I wasn't just standing there. My hand was on the doorknob. From the other side of the door, I heard the man dragging himself up the stairs. One step and then another. I tried to let go of the knob, but my hand wouldn't move. And then the man said from below, "You keep leaving it unlocked." I woke up on the couch and the house was dark. Every light I had turned on before falling asleep was off. I sat there for a second trying to calm down, and then I heard a noise from the hallway. The basement door was open, only a few inches. I don't know how long I stared at it. I lived alone, so I had shut that door before going to bed. I was sure of it. I got up, turned on the hall light, and I pushed the door closed with my foot, but I didn't go downstairs. The next morning I went across the street, and Diane opened her door before I knocked, like she had been waiting for me. I told her the basement door had been open, and she didn't say, "I told you so," or ask for details. She just said, "He's closer now." And that was when she told me that she used to own my house. Years ago, before I moved in, Diane and her husband lived there. She said the dream started about a month after they bought the place, and at first she thought it was stress. And then her husband began having the same dream about the basement and the man and the slow climb up the stairs. And Diane said they never saw his face. They only heard him dragging his foot behind him. Her husband joked about it at first, but then one morning, she woke up and found him standing in front of the open basement door, and he was asleep. His hand was stretched out into the darkness like someone below was holding it. They moved out less than a week later, and I asked why she stayed across the street. She said they couldn't sell both houses at once, and by the time they could afford to leave the neighborhood completely, her husband got sick. And then he died. I didn't know what to say. She looked past me towards my house and said, "I thought it stopped when we left." I didn't sleep at home that night. I stayed with my sister and told her enough to make it sound like I was just creeped out by my house. I didn't tell her the whole story because I knew how it sounded, and I slept fine there. No issues, no nightmare. But by the third night, I still convinced myself I had scared myself over nothing. Diane was an old woman with a strange story, and I had let it get into my head, so I went home. I locked the basement door with the chair under the handle, and then I put my phone on the dresser and recorded a video of the hallway all night. I don't know what I expected to catch, maybe some sleepwalking or maybe nothing. I went to bed around 11, and the dream started almost immediately. I was standing at the basement door, but the chair was gone, and the door was wide open. The man was near the top of the stairs. I could hear him breathing. It was wet, heavy breaths. One hand slid up the railing, and then the other. He was only 2 steps away from the hallway. I tried to move, but I couldn't. And then he lifted his head, and I still couldn't see his face. Then he said, "You went somewhere I couldn't follow." I woke up standing in the hallway, and my hand was on the basement doorknob. The chair had been moved to the side, and the door was closed, but it wasn't locked. I backed away and ran to my bedroom. I checked the video on my phone, and most of it showed nothing, just the dark hallway. But then at 3:18 in the morning, my bedroom door opened. I walked out and I was asleep. My eyes were open, but I could tell the way that I moved that I wasn't awake. I walked straight to the basement door and moved the chair out of the way and reached for the knob, but then I stopped. I stood there for almost 5 minutes, completely still, and then from somewhere downstairs a man's voice said, "Almost." I closed the door and packed a bag. I left before sunrise, and Diane watched from her porch while I put my things in the car. She didn't say anything, she just looked out my basement window. I stayed with my sister after that and broke my lease a month later. People tell me it was stress or sleepwalking, or even that Diane planted the whole idea in my head. And maybe that's what I'd think too if I heard it from someone else. But I know she described my dream before I ever told anyone. And I know there's a man's voice on that video coming from my basement. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
This picture was taken back in 2015 by my sister in our kitchen. Right behind her is an empty cabinet. But if you look closely, the faint and chilling face of a child seems to be peering out from right behind her. At the time, we were completely alone, making the discovery of that hidden face deeply unsettling to look back on. The house next to mine is haunted. We constantly hear noises coming from inside. Strangely, this only seems to happen when the owner is away. Late one night, a neighbor who lives directly behind the haunted house arrived home. He instantly felt a suffocating sensation, as if something malicious was watching him. Terrified, he pulled out his phone and recorded the dark windows. The owner was away with his son at the time. I'm from a small town in Canada. I was at my grandma's 93rd birthday, and the town hall that we were in was built over a former graveyard. During the party, we were all taking a bunch of group photos together. In one of them, I caught this in the background. This was taken at my sister's job. It could just be a trick of the light, but I'm not too sure.
The person that sent me the story called it My Friendly Ghost. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hi, Anti-Matrix. Hi! I love watching your videos and thought I would share my own experience with you. For as long as I can remember, I have had paranormal experiences, from seeing my granddad after he passed away, to seeing dark shadows and feeling someone breathing on my neck when no one is there. That escalated very quickly. My mom and my eldest daughter are the same and see and feel things all the time. Years ago, after going through a bad breakup and living back with my parents, I was offered a one-bedroom flat to rent. I live in England. I was given a time to meet the housing officer at the property so I could view it first to make sure that it was suitable for me. I arrived with my mom, and the second we walked into the flat, the overwhelming smell of death hit us in the face. I asked the housing officer about it, and he assured us that it was just wet dog. I instantly knew that someone had died there, but I was desperate for my own place, so I accepted the property. No! I had to go to the housing office to sign for the flat and get the keys. I asked about the smell and was informed that yes, the previous occupant had died on the bedroom floor, but he wasn't found until a few weeks later after the downstairs neighbor had complained about the smell and liquid dripping from their ceiling. Oh my God. Ew. It took a long time and a lot of bleach to get rid of the smell, but I managed it at the end. I had decided to decorate the flat before I moved in properly, as I was still staying at my parents', so I'd spend my free time at the flat doing it up, and then at night I would go back to my parents to sleep. On the first day I was decorating, my mom came to help. She was in one room and I was in the other. I heard her say, "What?" and then she shouted, "What the hell?" She came running into the room, shaking, asking if I had just been stood behind her. I was sat on the floor painting the skirting board, so I told her, obviously not. She told me that she felt someone behind her and could feel them breathing on her neck. When she turned around expecting to see me, no one was there. During the few weeks of decorating, things would go missing or would move places, such as I would put the paintbrush on the paint tray, go to the bathroom, and when I came out, it would be on the other side of the room. I was there alone. Fast forward a few weeks to me moving in. I was sat watching TV one night and I looked at the clock to check the time and it said 10:30. I knew it was much earlier than that because of what was on the TV. The clock had been working fine, but had somehow jumped forward to 10:30 and stopped. Oh my God, I wonder if that's what time the person died. I changed the battery, but this continued to happen every day, always at 10:30. A few nights after the first clock incident, I heard the floorboards creak on the landing and saw a dark shadow of a person pass by the room that I was in. I shot up thinking someone had broken in, but there was no one there. I sat on my settee and asked, "Is anyone there?" My glasses case, which was sat on the coffee table in front of the settee, started spinning and then flew off and hit the wall. The strange thing was, I didn't feel scared at all. If anything, I felt at ease and safe. That doesn't make any sense, my friend. What are you talking about? Something was literally just spinning in front of you and shot at the wall, and you feel safe? Things like this continued to happen, but each time it did, I would talk out loud and felt completely at peace. Every time someone came to visit, they would inform me that they felt something or saw something that they couldn't explain, but would tell me that they didn't feel scared. During this time, I learned that the previous tenant was called Yemen and that he was last heard from at 10:30 p.m. That's what I'm saying. My clock continued to either freeze at 10:30 or jump forward to that time. I would talk to Yemen about my life, my worries, and my troubles, and he kind of became my counselor. Fast forward a year or so, and I became pregnant, but split from the father a few months after finding out. I was crying one night as I was unsure of how I was going to be able to do it on my own when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I knew then that I wasn't on my own. I don't know if it was Yemen or a loved one that had passed, but it helped soothe me and brought me peace. When my daughter was about a year old, I would hear her laughing and talking to someone, but obviously no one was there. She would reach out and walk as if she was holding someone's hand. As I was in an upstairs flat, I had stairs that led down to my own front door. The stairs were extremely steep, so I had a baby gate at the top of them to stop my daughter from going near them. At the bottom of the stairs was her pram. One day I had a friend visit, and as they were leaving, I was in the kitchen making my daughter some lunch. They said that they would see themselves out, so I asked them to make sure that the baby gate was locked. A few minutes after they left, I heard thud, 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 and instantly knew that my daughter had fell down the stairs. I flew down to her as fast as I could, expecting the worst because of how steep they were and how big the pram was at the bottom. But when I got to her, she was laughing and said, "Yemen, catch!" There wasn't a single mark on her. I truly believe that Yemen had helped her and stopped her from getting hurt. We moved out a year or two later into a proper house so that she could have her own room, and I was heartbroken to leave Yemen behind. He saved my daughter, and in a way, he saved me from some of the lowest times in my life. My daughter is 14 now and doesn't remember anything about Yemen. She has started to experience paranormal things herself, but I've explained that there is nothing to worry about and that she comes from a family of women who can see and feel things. I have 1,000,001 different stories about what myself, my mom, and my daughter have experienced, but I would be here all day. Thanks for reading. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so this started out, I was thinking it was going to be a very scary story, which I should have known by the name of it, My Friendly Ghost, that it was not going to be. But that stuff still would have scared me in the beginning. Anyway, I don't know how people experience these things and are not scared. Like, at least, like, startled scared. But Yemen turned out to be a real nice, friendly ghost, and I'm so glad that he was there for you. And oh my God, he saved your daughter. How freaking cool was that? Thank you, Yemen. This was a really cool story. Thank you so much for sharing.
This submission to Spooky Scary Storytime is called The Turtle Lady, and it was submitted by someone named Priscilla, who says that she received a dream or a message in a dream from someone who she believes was an ancestor warning her of something bad that would happen. And this isn't necessarily spooky, but it is a series of interesting events. So Priscilla and her fiance actually ended up taking custody of her fiance's nephew. At the time this story takes place, her fiance's nephew was 6 years old, and the mother was not incarcerated at the time, but she was homeless and in active addiction, though she did have a car that they had gifted her, so she had a place to sleep and store her things. The morning after DFACS told the couple that they were to keep custody, they slept in a little late. And this was an adjustment period as well, because Priscilla says that her youngest child is 26, so she wasn't used to having a small child in the house. But immediately before awaking, Priscilla was having this very vivid dream of a tribe of some sort, and in the tribe was this round-faced woman who seemed very familiar to Priscilla, but Priscilla in her dream didn't understand how she knew this woman. But the woman's face was painted green and she had a red stripe across her eyes. She was holding what appeared to be a giant nutshell or perhaps an empty turtle shell in her left hand. She dipped 2 fingers from her right hand in the shell and then poked Priscilla in the forehead and said, "Wake up, wake up." And she didn't say this in like a threatening way, but it was very stern. And Priscilla immediately woke up and she looked at the clock and realized that they were late to take the 6-year-old nephew to school. And so she woke up her fiance and she said, we need to go now. And while the nephew missed the school bus, he would still be on time if they drove him. So the family piled into the car and headed to the school. While they were on the way to the school, she's telling her fiance all about this dream. She's like, I don't know how, but I just feel like it was my ancestors in the dream, but I can't really make sense of it. But like, why would she be trying to wake me up, you know? And she said that she's known to be a little bit bonkers, but she's glad that she told her fiance about it before they got to the school, because when they got there, they noticed her fiance's sister, so the child's mother, was already parked at the school, and they watched her get out and walk up into the school. They weren't sure why she was there, so they decided they should probably go in as well. So they got the nephew off into his class, and then all of the adults were called into one of the counselor's offices. Counselor asked the child's mother why she was there, and she said, I'm just here to update the school with everything that's going on. But Priscilla says that she has a history of lying, and it was very quickly determined that she was not there to update the school. She was there to pull the child out of the school and run with him. And then the school counselor looks at Priscilla and her fiance, and she's like, why are you here? And they said, we just overslept and we just had to take him so he would be at school on time. But Priscilla says she believes the reason they overslept and she was having that vivid dream about the tribe and then was awakened by who she now believes was the turtle lady was because if they hadn't overslept, then the child would have gotten on the bus and then been gone with his mother. But they wouldn't have known until later that day when he failed to get off the bus. She wanted to mention that she was not familiar with the turtle lady until she told her therapist about it. And the therapist apparently has heard of this legend of the turtle woman or the turtle lady, who is known to be a protector of child spirits in native tribes. She says while she's not entirely sure that that's who she met, she does have a strong feeling that that is who is looking out for her. And she no longer has to worry about the child's mother kidnapping him because she is now incarcerated. As far as the concoction in the turtle shell, she's not sure what it was, but she does know that she dipped her fingers in something and then poked her in the forehead, telling her to wake up. So if you have thoughts about this story, or if you have an experience of your own, let us know what you think. And Priscilla will be seeing the comments. That is her real name.
There's something going on in Washington State. Now, there have been so many reports of people who are seeing these orbs of light, and they have seen them in the sky. They've seen them chase people. They've seen them moving through the woods at incredible speeds. They're described as to be about the size of a baseball to a basketball. They come in many different colors. They seem to show some kind of intelligence. Even a few people have said that these things have spoke to them or communicated with them. Now, there was a story out of Lakeland, Washington. There was this man named Stephen. Stephen said that him and his family for about 40 years have been seeing these strange orbs of light. He said it started with his grandfather, and then his father and his mother, and then him eventually. Said they will often see them in the sky at night. Sometimes they will follow their vehicles. Sometimes they see them just passing by down the street. He said his uncle even reported to be chased by one of these things. But he said the strangest encounter happened with his grandfather. When his grandfather was a young boy, he was in his bedroom one night. And as he sat in his bed, he said all of a sudden his room went silent. He said it was so quiet you could hear the drop of a pin. And he said that's when he looked over to his window and he sees this very bright light, like a spotlight shining at his window. And that's when he sees this ball of light come through the glass. This thing was about the size of a softball, and it was hovering about 3 feet off the ground. It moved over into the corner of his room, and it sort of sat there. He said then this thing descended down to the ground, and it moved all the way to the foot of his bed. It went up, came down, and hovered right next to his leg. He said then it went up to his shoulder, up to his head, and then it went back up the wall. So that's when it took off back over into the corner. He said he started to notice it was pulsating, and it began to change colors. At first it was white, and now it was turning this very dark blue. He said he felt like there was some sort of anger or just something evil about this thing. He said it then darted in his direction. And the next thing he remembers is feeling this sort of energy go through his body and seeing this bright flash of light. The next thing he knows, he is downstairs in the living room on the ground. He has this huge gash on his leg. He has a huge gash on his arm. He ended up having to get 27 stitches. Now he tells his father about all this. And his father says, you were probably just roughhousing and you fell down the stairs. But he said, no, I seen this light. It was real. And somehow it transported me from my bedroom down to the living room. And he said the next day there was a knock at the door. He said there were these two men in suits and ties. And he said they came in, they talked to his father, and they said they were asking about some strange lights that had been seen in the area. He said he got ready to say something when his father just gave him this look, like, you better not say anything. So he kept quiet. And he said he knew that whatever he had seen had something to be connected with those two men that came over. And it's believed that still to this day, his grandfather claims that these lights are evil. Now, not too far from this general area, there was another story that took place. There was this young man. His name was Baker. Baker said him and his family, they lived in this duplex apartment. And he said the downstairs neighbors, there were these two Filipino guys. He said they were very quiet. You hardly ever seen them. And he said they always acted very, very strange. And he kind of got this weird feeling about them. He said one night his father told him to take out the trash. So he said he grabbed the trash bags, he opened the front door, and he goes down the stairs. Well, where these garbage cans were located, it was right next to the woods. And he said as he put the garbage bag into the garbage can, he looked over and he noticed these two Filipino men were looking around the woods for something. He said they were acting very erratic and strange. So he said he ran inside. He told his father, like, something's going on with these guys. Like, they're up to something. I know it. And so his dad and him went back outside. And his father walked over to the woods and he starts yelling, hey, are you guys all right? Like, is everything okay? He said they didn't hear a response, but they heard the sound of something rustling the trees. So he said him and his father, they proceeded into the woods. They came to this fence. He said on the other side of the fence, they began to see this glowing light the size of a basketball. And he said that's when this ball started to talk to them. But not just physically talk to them. It was somehow telepathically talking to them in their head. And he said each one, him and his father, they were told different things. They were given different conversations. Although they were both standing right next to each other, they could hear these things talking to them, telling them separate things. So he said this ball of light then just took off into the sky. Well, the next day, he said his father and him went to check on these guys that were downstairs. But they soon found out that they had moved. And apparently that morning they had moved out. And still to this day, he has no idea what they seen there out in the woods behind the house. Living next to the woods can be creepy. It's not for everyone because you will see things, you will hear things. It can get very weird. And there is a particular set of rules that if you find yourself living next to the woods or the forest, that you should follow. Now, The first rule is at nighttime, always lock your doors, always close your curtains. Also, at nighttime, never look out the window facing the woods. If you hear a knock at your door at nighttime, do not answer it, especially if it is your back door. You will see lights coming from the woods. Do not follow them. Do not try and communicate with them. Just ignore them. And the most important thing you must remember is that anything you see outside, most likely it's not real. You are not seeing it, or you are not hearing it. Now, this story comes out of Tennessee. There's this man named Christian. Christian said that at one point in time, he grew up in this farmhouse that was out in the boonies. And he said they lived deep, deep in the woods, and it was a dirt road that took several miles to get to their house. And they literally had no neighbors around. Well, he said when they first moved in, there was a lot of weird stuff that would happen. For instance, the dogs didn't want to go anywhere near the woods. They would get to the tree line and they would turn around. And it was like they were afraid of something. They also noticed these deer. They would come into their yard at night and they would just be staring out into the woods like they were scared of something. And then one night, something very strange happened. So it was about 11 o'clock at night. And on the back door, they hear boom, 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 a knock. And that's when his father goes to the back door and he opens it up. There was no one out there. He said as he looked out into the woods, he started to hear screams. And it sounded like someone was in trouble. So he said he got up and him and his father went outside and they started looking around. They couldn't see anybody. So eventually they called the police. And the police came out and they searched the area. They couldn't find anyone. Well, on a regular basis, they started hearing screams outside their house coming from the woods. And every night, something would be knocking on their back door. A few times, they found the back door wide open. The other weird thing that started happening is Christian's brother started having these weird nightmares. And not only was he having nightmares, he started to sleepwalk. And he would get up from his bed, he'd walk down the hallway into the kitchen and out the back door. And right before he would get into the woods, his dad or his mom would stop him and wake him up. And, this happened several times. Well, eventually his father put up like a camera outside because he was trying to figure out who's knocking on the back door. And one day he looks at the video and he sees his son going out the back door. And he notices he just starts looking around like he's looking for something out in the woods, like something was calling him. And finally, his father comes running out and stops him. So the father started to get really creeped out. He told Christian and his brothers and sisters, do not go out in the woods. And he said that's when one night there was a very loud banging sound coming from the back door. And it was almost like someone was trying to get in this door. So he said his father grabs a baseball bat. He goes to the back door and he opens it. And he looks around and out of the corner of his eyes, he sees something moving in the woods. So he said his father started to make his way towards the wood line. And that's when he sees something run back further into the woods. So his father starts to go into the woods down this trail. And he said he could see this thing from a distance. And he noticed when he would kind of move, it would move. Or when he would turn to the right, it would turn to the right. Or when he would turn to the left, it would turn to the left. And he said whatever he would do, whatever movement he would do, this thing would follow. And he said that's when he realized whatever this was, it was almost like looking at a mirror. This thing was copying him. It was following his every movement. So his father turns around, takes off running through the woods, gets back in the house, and tells everyone, get in the vehicle, we are leaving. And they moved that night and left everything behind in the house. And he said still to this day, he has nightmares whenever he's near the woods because he still thinks about his time living in that place. You know why something evil has to ask permission to come into your house? It sort of goes back to this old belief that nothing evil, nothing negative can enter into your life, can enter into your home unless you give it permission. See, we naturally have this protective barrier surrounding us. Some people call it guardian angels. Some people call it, a protective spirit. But we are naturally protected from these sort of things. But these evil, these negative entities try and break us down and get us to open that space, to allow them to come in. And so our homes, where we live, where we love, where we share intimate moments, right? That becomes a protective space. And this evil entity cannot enter through that doorway until you give it permission. Now, this story comes out of North Carolina. There was this woman who said when she was a young girl, she grew up in a small home up in the Appalachian Mountains. And she said when they first moved into this house, she remembers at night hearing what sounded like young children out in the woods laughing and saying things and calling her to come outside. And she would see shadows moving across her window like someone was walking around out there. She just ignored it, and she really had no idea what was going on. And she had heard stories, she had heard rumors from friends, that if anything evil comes to your door or invites you outside, do not listen to them, do not follow. Well, this one particular night, her parents left her in charge of watching her brothers and sisters. And she said they were running around the house playing when all of a sudden she got kind of this sick feeling in her stomach, like something was wrong. And she said her brother started screaming and started freaking out and crying. And she's like, what's going on? Like, what's wrong? And he says, they're coming for us. Like, they're going to get us. They're coming. And she's like, what are you talking about? Who's coming? And he just kept saying, like, they're coming. And all of a sudden they hear boom, 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 like a knock at the front door. So she runs over to the window and she looks out. And she said at the front door was this young boy, with an old-timey haircut and wearing sort of like this blue jacket and blue pants with these like black boots. And she said he just looked out of place. She knew something was wrong. So she calls out to him from behind the door. Yes, like, what do you want? What do you need? And she said this boy responded, please let me in. Please let me in. And she's like, no, I'm not supposed to open the door. Mom and Dad are gone. Like, I can't open the door for you. And he's like, please, it's cold. Let me in. And she said, no, you're going to have to go somewhere else. I'm not opening the door. And right as she says that, the lights in the house started to flicker. And she said she took her brothers and sisters, they ran into their mother's room, and she closed the door, and they all just started praying. And finally, their parents got home, and they felt safe again. And she said within a couple weeks, it was all over this town that there was a young kid who disappeared. And she felt like that had something to do with whoever was knocking on the door that night.
This first video I'm going to show you was actually sent to me by one of you, and it freaked me out completely, so thank you so much for sharing. This video comes from the Philippines, and it shows a young boy around 7 or 8 years old taking photos on his phone. Then he starts recording himself, and as he's moving the camera around, we see this. The woman that appears in the video with him is his grandmother, but the only problem with that is that she had passed away some time before. Now, what really freaks people out about this video, myself included, is the way that she looks. Her eyes appear to be very heavily sunken in, looking almost skeletal, as if she hasn't been alive in a while. I think this is one of the more convincing paranormal videos that I've seen, but let me know what you think. This next video was also shared with me by one of you, and I had been looking for it for the longest time, so thank you so much. This video comes from Argentina, and it shows an overnight security guard sounding terrified. He works security at a stadium, and he was downstairs in the locker room area making sure everything was in order. But according to him, he kept hearing a strange noise that didn't sound like a human being. So out of fear, he started recording, and he caught this.
Pero como mierda puede ser que no haya nada hoy. Es la tercera vez.
Again, this video is definitely one of the most convincing ones that I've seen, but let me know, as always, what you think.
For TikTok purposes, this is a fake story and it never actually happened. I became convinced that this one hospital wasn't treating patients, but it was choosing them. This happened after I was in a severe car accident. It wasn't anything too serious, but I had a broken arm, a concussion, and a couple cracked ribs. So the hospital admitted me overnight just for observation, and everything seemed pretty normal at first. The nurses were very kind. The doctor explained what my injuries were to me. I figured that I would be out in the morning. Around midnight, another patient was wheeled into the room just across the hall, and I remember he looked terrified, honestly, and he just kept saying, "Why won't anybody tell me what floor we're on?" And the nurse just kind of moved the curtain. After that, I didn't hear another peep from that guy across the hall. And then a couple hours later, I had a nurse, and she walked in. She had like a stack of paperwork, and she looked at my wristband and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, like wrong patient." I kid you not, 15 minutes after that, 2 people came into the hallway with an empty gurney, and they looked inside my room and they said, "Is this the one?" And then the other person said, "No, not yet." Like, what is that supposed to mean? Not yet? I don't know if I was just being delusional or what, but I feel like every conversation that I overheard after that felt like it was about me. Around 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep, and I actually went and peeked across the hall to see like if I could hear a patient in there. And I took a peek in, and nobody was in there. It was empty, and it looked like the bed was already stripped of the sheets. As I walked back to my room, I noticed that there was a patient chart left on a nurse's station, and so I looked at it, and I had my last name written on it. So of course I read more into it. It was about me. As I was looking at it, I noticed that it had like test results, and then it said donor candidate, and then it had several organs listed underneath that, and it had like empty boxes that you could check off. As I was looking at this paper, somebody snuck up behind me and they said, "That's not yours," in a very nice way. And I turned around and it was a doctor. I hadn't seen him before. He wasn't one of my doctors, and he grabbed my arm and he said, "Let's just get you back to your room. You know, you should probably rest." And so I went back into the room with him, and then as soon as he turned the corner, I got back up and I started to walk out of my room. I looked for the closest exit that I could. I pushed the door. I went down like probably 6 flights of stairs. I was in pain for sure, but I was so paranoid of what was going on in this hospital. Once I got to the end of the staircase, there was a security guard, and he asked me like, "Are they already like discharging you or whatever?" And I said, "Oh, I just need some air." And so he just pointed to the entrance for me. He didn't hesitate. The second I got outside, I kept walking. I did not stop. I went to the nearest gas station and I called one of my loved ones to pick me up. And then I had them take me to a different hospital. And after I was admitted there, they transferred over my files from the other hospital. The doctor at my new one told me that every lab and every scan transferred properly, and that was great. And then he just was going through some other details, and he said that I was discharged at 2:48 a.m. That's where it got me, because 2:48 a.m. I certainly had not been discharged yet, because that's probably when I was about to look at the nurse's station of the patient chart, so I was definitely still in the hospital. I don't know, in my head I've spent years trying to figure it out. Maybe because I was concussed, maybe I was just seeing things or being delusional, or maybe I was looking at somebody else's paperwork. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure what they had going on in that hospital. It didn't feel right though.
Do you ever just like look at an object and wonder if it's somebody having a salvia experience? I hesitate because that sounds crazy, but I think about that all the time. Like, you can't tell me you don't like look at this and think that somebody is not looking through its eyes right now having some kind of salvia experience. Especially after reading about the ceiling fan story, it's almost hard to not believe that that's happening. It freaks me out. Apparently this guy who took salvia, he experienced 15 years of his life as somebody's ceiling fan. So this guy, he was alone in his bed and he decided to take a really big, long drag of salvia by himself. The trip itself, like in real reality, only lasted about 27 minutes, but he was instantly ripped out of his body and identity. Completely forgot that he was a human who had just ingested something to feel this way, you know what I mean? And he literally became a ceiling fan in the house of somebody that he doesn't even know. And he describes feeling every single moment as this ceiling fan, like right down to spinning, collecting dust, the nights where he couldn't fall asleep. And he would like describe the routine of every single person who lived in the house he was the ceiling fan of. He explained that he watched the family grow up. He watched the kids grow from children to teenagers to grown adults to the couple themselves growing into adulthood and, maturing into old people. And for him, this 27-minute trip experience turned into, or what felt like, a 15-year life sentence, trapped, unable to do anything about it, just observing. But then as suddenly as it started, the trip just ended.
And I don't know, that's horrifying to me. And every time I look at like an inanimate object now, I'm just like, I wonder if that's somebody experiencing a salvia trip and they're just like watching my life from my ceiling fan or my Littlest Pet Shops, you know? That completely freaks me out.
Want to get creeped out? A lot of us have heard of the elevator game. It is this elevator ritual where you go to all these different floors and it's supposed to essentially bring you to another realm. It's a ritual that's really out there, and didn't really think that I would ever hear or find a story of someone who tried it that was like believable. But I have a story of someone who tried it and almost like started essentially experiencing what I think is potentially a glitch in the Matrix after doing the ritual. This is a story of someone who tried the elevator game. So this guy's name is Lachlan. Lachlan knew that he wanted to try the elevator game because he had seen it on like different TV shows, and he just thought it was really cool and really fun, and was like, obviously nothing's gonna happen because it's pretty out there. Yeah, it is pretty out there. It sounds pretty far-fetched, right? Yeah. He went to his friend's apartment building that had multiple floors. He did it alone. He just knew that he could do it in that building because it had enough floors and stuff. He goes, there's no one else around because he goes late. He goes at like 11:30 at night and nothing happens. Like, he follows each step. He hits all the buttons. You know, when it says at the end, if you hit one and it starts going down, then the ritual failed? Yes. That's what happens. So he's like, okay, this is what I thought would happen. Right? He goes home and is thinking nothing of it. But the next day he's at his college class and something weird happens. His professor pauses at the whiteboard while talking and stands still for at least 10 seconds while he was like writing something on the whiteboard. Okay, weird. And 10 seconds, good chunk of time. Yeah. No one else seems to bat an eye at it. Weird. At this point, he's not thinking this has anything to do with the elevator game. Right. Yeah. That night, he goes home and he's in his apartment. He's watching TV and want to get creeped out. I'm always talking about different creepy games and rituals because you guys love to hear about them. But in particular, it seems like all of these creepy games and rituals have very strict rules that you're supposed to follow to a T. And there is this one ritual called hide and seek alone, or Hitori Kakurembo. Sorry if I said that wrong, but essentially you fill this doll with rice, you wrap it in red string, you put a fingernail in it. You're essentially creating a vessel, inviting spirits into this doll. Well, Jessica recently told a story of someone who tried this ritual and they didn't follow the rules to a T, and it caused chaos.
So the girl who did this, her name is Ashley. When she did it, she was 16 years old. Oh, wow. Okay. So she's an adult now. It's been like a few years. So her parents went away, left her home alone. So she wanted to do something. So she gets it all ready with the rice and the string and like the nail and names it. She names it Emily. She gets her hiding spot ready, puts the TV in there, a cup of salt water, all that stuff. Something that she pointed out is that she has a very big family. She has many like great aunts and uncles and
kind of like our family.
Exactly. But anyway, so she names this doll Emily. One of her distant cousins also named Emily.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, interesting. I was wondering why you were telling us.
Yes, you're not supposed to name the doll after someone that you know. Right. Unless you fucking hate them. Anyway.
Oh, no.
So she gets everything ready to go at 3 a.m. She brings her doll.
Sorry, again, I forgot that it starts at 3 a.m. That's so hardcore.
Yeah, there's no way. So she brings her doll into the bathroom, places it in the bathtub filled with water. She says, Emily is the first it 3 times, goes to her bedroom, turns on the TV, closes her eyes, and she counts to 10 out loud. She goes back to the bathroom, goes to the doll, removes it from the tub, says, I have found you, Emily, cuts the thread that's wrapped around the doll, and then she says, you are the next it, Emily. So creepy.
Yeah, it is.
Puts her back in the tub. Ashley runs back to her bedroom, stays there for a couple minutes, and then she takes her salt water, takes a sip of it, carries the rest of it in her hand. She finds the doll actually not in the bathtub, which is interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I made a video titled, What is the scariest thing a kid has ever said to you? And I am reading your comments. My husband went to the airport and I was home with the kids. My son was in his room on the game and my daughter was playing in the living room. I peeked at my son and shut his door. My head was facing him. I turned around. My daughter stood up and said, why did you look at me like that? And I said, what do you mean? She said, you had a face on the back of your head just staring at me. She is 7. Please don't tell me Voldemort was back there. Girl, what the fuck? See, because I am not her parent, I would be so curious and be like, what did the face look like? But no, because if I am the parent, I don't want to know anything. I don't want to know what that face looked like, what she saw. No, thank you. My kids and I had just moved moved into a new place. I was getting my 2 daughters ready for bed. I walked out of my bedroom to the living room and my 6-year-old stopped talking mid-sentence, looked behind me towards my bedroom and said, "Who was that?" I froze and said, "What do you mean?" She then said, as calm as can be, "Who was that tall man in all black that just walked into your bathroom?" I'm a single mom and it was just us 3 in the house like it's always been. Apparently it was not just you 3 in the house. I'd be sleeping in the car that night because what the fuck? No, fuck that. Wait, did you go and check? What would I do? And you're a single mom. Oh my god. I don't know. I'd be so scared to check. Like, don't scare me like that. Don't say that shit to me. Anyway, if you have something that a kid has said to you that's scary as fuck, leave it in the comments so I can make a video.
The devil appeared to me in a dream and he wanted me to sell my soul. This is a personal story of mine. Before I continue with the story, please guys don't think I'm part of the occult. I do rituals, I do black magic. Guys, no. I do this strictly for entertainment and because TikTok pays a bag. So I was sleeping one night and I had a dream. It all starts with a dream. If the devil cannot get to you in this world, he will definitely try get you in your sleep. And somehow it worked. So the dream's randomly just playing out. I'm doing whatever, just having fun, just doing what dreamers do. And then I randomly teleported to a car and I was sitting on the passenger side. When I opened the door and I looked to my left, there's like a tall black shadowy figure with black cloak, like proper scary. I tried to look closer to see what the face looked like, but it was just covered all in black. And you know what was scary? It was seeing the figure itself in a black appearance. I instantly knew what that was. I knew it was a jinn. But then it got closer and closer. And then I blinked my eyes and then it just disappeared like that. Then for some reason I look in the, the mirror in the car, that one right there. I'm looking in it and then I see the thing like right behind me, like behind the passenger seat. And all it said was, "I know what you want. If you want to be successful, just say the word." I didn't know what word he was talking about, but at the same time, I knew what he was talking about, if that makes sense. As soon as he finished saying that, my mind went completely blank, like I couldn't think. I didn't know what to think. And as soon as that happened, I kid you not, the dream ended and I woke up. Guys, I don't know, this has never happened to me before. Maybe because I'm doing this horror jinn content, they're trying to like mash up my brain or something, I don't know. But I feel like it's something serious because I never really seen the devil in my dream like that before, you get me? And I can't be possessed, I don't think I can be. But I don't know, it was weird, man. I don't know, it was weird, honestly guys, man. I wouldn't wish that on anyone else, I promise. It's not, it's a weird feeling. It's not really scary, it's weird because it's never really happened to me before.
Here are more spooky stories that I found in my TikTok comments. Let's go! When I was 12 to 14 years old, I had a nightmare. I was going to the bathroom and closed the door and started going, and I looked at the door and saw me but older, crazy hair and covered in scratches and cuts. I was super skinny. Years later, I looked in the mirror as I was having a panic attack and realized I looked the same as that nightmare. Recently, I went into this vintage shop and found this doll. It was very clearly very old and its eyes moved on their own. Not like the sleeping eyes, but from left to right. I don't know if that was part of it. My friend instantly got a headache later in the day while we were outside, and I have an evil eye bracelet with charms, and it felt like someone picked up the charm and started shaking it. I felt it and I saw it, and as soon as I did see it, it stopped. I got chills down my whole body. Maybe not that creepy, but last night I was talking to my boyfriend over the phone, and he said, "Don't let it go there," referencing a Hungarian song. And as soon as he said that, an empty can and my headphones fell from my desk as I was lying in bed, so I couldn't have knocked them down. It was also completely dark and it was late. My boyfriend was washing his hands and forgot to turn off the bathroom light. Then as he's walking out, he feels a hand touch his shoulder from behind him in the bathroom, and then he turns off the light. I'm convinced it was my grandpa who died here telling him, "Hey, stop wasting electricity." Not really scary, but I sleep in the same room my grandma died, and the rest of the room where she died started recently having mold, while another part of the room where I sleep is untouched. The room is also always colder compared to other rooms in the house, despite the room being closest to the exit doors of the house. One night, I had a dream where I was with this guy I knew, and he accidentally hooked me with the fish hook. As an apology, he gave me a handwritten journal, and the first page was a phone number, and the rest of the journal was pages filled with things about fish and fishing. A couple days later, after having this dream, I woke up in the morning and my phone was laying on the floor across the room. I always put my phone in the same spot on my nightstand, so it was really weird and creepy. I'm also a super light sleeper, so I would have heard it if someone had moved it. Later on, I was thinking about how it could have gotten there, which for some reason made me remember my dream, and I was able to remember the phone number. So I searched up the phone number, and it was to this random website called Gotcha Hooked Fish Trips. It was so weird, and to this day I have no clue what it means or why any of it happened. This one is so interesting to me because I'm wondering if maybe something is pulling you to the Gotcha Hooked Fish Trips, or maybe you're connected to fish in some way. I don't know. When I was little, me and my cousins were playing in the kids' room at my grandparents' house. We were getting older, so likely we were watching TV in there. Because toys weren't a thing anymore, most were put away in the closet. I remember hearing a very distinct voice from the Dora doll we had. We used to play with it all the time, so we knew exactly what the noise came from. Very weird, but it had been a while since we played with it, so my oldest cousin decided to check it out. The toy was in the middle of the floor, front and center, and had no batteries. It could not make any noises, and it 100% came from that toy. I was 19, homeless, and experiencing severe depression and religious psychosis. I was convinced I was being attacked by a demon. My friend took me to see her friend, who happens to be a witch. She immediately sat me down and gave me tea and warned me that something was attached to me. 16 years later, I was doing so much better, but I constantly battle waves of depression. I went to a friend's house to do a new home cleansing thing where we just bring good vibes and some superstitious gifts and charms. An acquaintance from work was there. We greeted each other, and after our little vibe session, she took some of the oil we were using to anoint the house and painted a sigil on my arm, apologized for being weird, and we laughed it off. But I couldn't shake it off. I asked her a week later why she felt the need to do that. She looked right over my shoulder and said, "There's something attached to you." I actually really appreciate that she felt the need to try and protect you, and I hope you're okay now. As always, I love these stories, and the more videos I post, it feels like the creepier these comments get, so keep on sending them. Okay, bye!
Want to get creeped out? Have you ever heard of the elevator game? It seriously blew up in the 2000s. It's been featured on a couple of different TV shows. A lot of people think it could never work. Nothing will ever happen if you try it. Obviously, I would think the same thing. But Jess and I do explain how it works on one of our podcast episodes that we recently put out. And we have a story of someone who tried it coming out. And I feel like it caused like a glitch in the Matrix for them. It's such a weird story. So anyways, if that's something you're interested in, check it out.
The elevator game has been circulating online for years. It's supposed to basically be a ritual that brings you to another world. Early English translations referred to it as how to get to another world using an elevator or elevator to another world. The oldest version that has been able to be located so far is November 22nd, 2008. Shit you need. One person only. Access to a building with at least 10 floors, and the elevator needs to be able to reach all 10 floors. The way that you follow the steps also depends on how many floors there actually are, if there's a basement, if there's not a basement. You can start the ritual at any time. You go into a building and head straight for the elevator. On the 5th floor, a woman may enter the elevator. Don't look at her. Don't speak to her. According to the legend, she isn't what she appears to be.
Want to get creeped out? Have you ever heard of Hitori Kakurambo? I'm sorry if I said that wrong, but also known as hide and seek alone, where you essentially make this doll almost like a vessel and you fill it with rice and your toenail and you use red string and you play hide and seek with this doll and essentially invite entities into your home. If you want to hear about it, Jess and I did a podcast episode where we talked about how you do it and what the rules are. It's in one of our creepy games and rituals episodes, and also have a story of someone who tried it and they did something you're not supposed to do and they had something crazy happen to someone they know.
Shit that you need. A stuffed doll with arms and legs, a bag of uncooked rice, nail clippers, a needle, red thread, something sharp like a knife or scissors, a bathroom with a bathtub, a cup of salt water, a television, a place to hide, incense or an ofura to cleanse the space, ritual setup. Cut open the doll and remove all of its innards. So stuff it. Innards has a comeback. We just talked about innards earlier. Fill the doll with the uncooked rice. Instead, clip off a small piece of your fingernail and place it inside the doll with rice. This ties you to the doll strongly. Sew the doll back up using the needle and the red thread. Without cutting the thread, wrap the remaining length around the doll and tie it off. Fill the bathtub with water. Cleanse the room where you'll be hiding using incense or ofuda. Set up a television in that same room. Place the cup of salt water and your sharp object inside of your hiding space. And finally, give the doll a name. The rice inside of the doll is used to represent its internal organs, also known as innards. According to the legend, the rice also acts as bait to attract spirits. The red thread is said to represent blood vessels. It's believed to trap any spirits that enter the doll, used for binding spirits. Performing the ritual.
A few weeks ago, I shared a story about a humanitarian cargo pilot who claimed that he unknowingly transported a massive sealed container out of the Congo. And if you haven't seen that story, I urge you to go back and check it out. I'm going to post it right here because this video will make so much more sense if you do go check it out. Now, this container that he transported out of the Congo had oxygen lines running through it. It had deep claw marks on it and a flight record that mysteriously vanished afterward. Now, as always, there's no way for me to verify any of this, so take it as entertainment and you decide if it's real or not. Now, thousands of you had asked if I had ever heard from him again, and I didn't think that I would until a few nights ago. His email subject was very short but very to the point, and all it read was, "There's much more to tell." And he said after that flight, he tried to convince himself that he'd imagined most of what he saw. He figured maybe it was an experimental animal, maybe some military equipment, and maybe something that was perfectly explainable. Then, about 4 months later, his phone rang, and it was the same job contractor who greeted him, and they said that they needed him again. And this time, he wasn't transporting the container, he was transporting what they needed to keep whatever was inside it alive. And he said that they loaded dozens of industrial oxygen cylinders into the aircraft, not medical tanks, but massive pressurized cylinders, unlike anything that he'd ever hauled before. And along with them were refrigerated crates marked only with barcodes, sealed black cases that nobody was allowed to open, and heavy pallets wrapped so tightly in black plastic, he couldn't even tell what the shape of whatever was in there was. Nothing. The destination was no commercial airport, just another dirt runway and out of the dense jungle. And he said the strangest part wasn't the cargo, it was the people that were waiting there when he arrived. They had no uniforms, no company logos, no names, no patches, no military insignia, nothing. Just armed men wearing plain gray clothing with, again, no identifying patches whatsoever. And as they unloaded the oxygen, he noticed something a little odd. Every cylinder was rushed toward the same group of buildings that was hidden beneath a camouflage netting. And every few minutes, the workers would stop, not because they were tired, but because they'd all turn and stare into the jungle at the exact same time, like they had heard something. And he had asked one of the American supervisors what was out there, and the man looked at him for a few seconds before quietly just saying to him, "Listen, man, if you hear branches breaking, stay on the runway." Nothing else. And the pilot said he pretty much just laughed it off, right? He was trying to put it out of his mind until he started hearing the breaking branches. And it wasn't just one branch, it was hundreds of them, slowly snapping one after another, moving through the trees toward the camp. And then eventually everything stopped. Every insect, every bird, every sound that a jungle could make. It just silent. He said the silence was so complete he could hear and feel his heart beating throughout his headset. And then when one of the workers dropped an oxygen cylinder, no one yelled, no one reacted. They just stared into the jungle, like as if that was going to trigger a reaction out of whatever was in there. Then, somewhere beyond the tree line, something let out a single low exhale. And it wasn't a roar or a growl, he said. It was just one enormous breath, as if something with impossibly large lungs had finally filled them. And then the team immediately ordered everyone back onto the aircraft. The cargo door hadn't even fully closed before they were told to taxi right away. And as he pushed the throttles forward, he looked toward the camp one last time before, it being out of sight. And he said he only caught a quick glimpse of whatever it was, and a line of floodlights suddenly started to shut off one by one, as though something enormous was passing in front of them and blocking them out. Then the email ended with him stating that he will no longer be in any contact with me, and that this was his last email, and that he would no longer, want to discuss anything further. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Is this just another story, or is it something far more interesting and dangerous? Again, this is for entertainment purposes only. Whether I believe it or not is irrelevant. It's a good story. If it's fake, real, whatever. But I want to know what you guys think.
Want to hear something scary? This is a part 2. I'm gonna get banned so fast. This is a part 2, so if I didn't get you in the last one, I will probably get you in this one, and if I do not, there will probably be another part. Speak cinema. Speak cinema. First story, names will be on the screen. When I was younger, I consistently shared a room with my sister throughout my entire childhood. We were extremely close and got along well for siblings, which is why I was so heartbroken when my sister left to move in with my mother instead. The entire night after she left, I cried and cried until eventually I must have tired myself out and fell asleep. However, the next morning when I opened my eyes and rolled over, I was met with the sight of a young girl watching me sleep. She was definitely not my sister, and I didn't recognize her, but I continued to see her every morning since then. I honestly thought I was going crazy, because no one else in my house shared a similar experience. That is until one of my good friends stayed overnight for a sleepover, and the next morning she woke me up frightened, saying she saw the same little girl to what I described, pacing back and forth by my doorway. Really creepy. However, maybe it's like a guardian angel situation, or something, or maybe there's a spirit in the house that felt sad for you, because you were sad that your sister left. Maybe it's a nice thing, Ghosts can be nice. I have played the game Baby Blue a few times. The first time I attempted it, I was met with disappointment and figured it was fake. However, I wasn't ready to give up and attempted it a second time. And the second time, it worked. The only way I can describe it is that when I rocked my arms, I felt the weight around 2 to 3 pounds cradled against me. This scared me, but I was honestly too curious to what would happen if I didn't flush the baby. That's a crazy sentence. I kept holding and rocking it, and it grew heavier and heavier until it eventually got too heavy for me to even hold, and I ended up dropping it. But when I dropped it, I swear to God I heard someone say, "You dropped my baby," and felt a hand grab my arm. Thankfully, however, I turned on the light fast enough that she couldn't get me, but when I looked at the arm that was tugged, I now had not only scratches but a handprint adorning my skin and the mirror. I stood shocked in horror for a good few seconds, but the scent of what I can only describe as rotting or dead animals began to fill the bathroom, and I immediately left the bathroom. 4 out of 10, would not recommend. That's so scary. Somebody in my comments, speaking of Baby Blue, somebody in my comments said that the mother in Baby Blue is Bloody Mary. I don't know if that's confirmed, but low-key that's a cool conspiracy theory, I guess.
We were hiking through a forest trail and we stopped to take a photo. At the time, the path was completely empty and it was just the sound of insects and the wind in the trees. Hours later, while looking through the photos, we noticed something we swear wasn't there. Hidden among the trees was a motionless figure staring directly at the camera. We still can't explain what we captured. This photo was taken by a friend of mine in their nephew's bedroom. At the time, they had been going through a serious hardship with their health. They would always say concerning things such as, "They're coming for me." Shortly after, this photo was taken and captured something deeply unsettling. They had to ask a priest to come and bless their home. The owner of this photo said that she was completely alone when she snapped this quick selfie. She never noticed anything until looking back at the photo later on. This photo was taken by a nurse in an ICU room at a Colorado hospital. She was testing her camera's flash in the room with all the lights off. This is what she ended up capturing.
Get unready with me whilst I tell you a story, a Reddit story, about the Appalachian Mountains because I find them so fascinating. I live in the heart of Appalachia, and this is easily the most terrifying story of one of my experiences. This story may be short or it may be drawn out. I'm recounting these events as I type, and it was honestly one of the most horrifying things I have experienced, and it brings me genuine stress to think about. This happened maybe 2 to 3 years ago. I live in southern West Virginia and have for my entire life. The woods and mountains surround every direction you look, and nighttime is a darkness that you can never dream of unless experienced. I was with a friend, I'll call him Mark. Mark was at my house one evening doing the usual things, watching UFC, playing Xbox, etc. It was extremely late when we finally got bored and decided to go for a walk on a nearby trail to smoke a joint. This was not a particularly long trail, but it is very dense in the woods that surround it, and it is easy to get freaked out when thinking of your surroundings. We finally get to about halfway into the trail, about 30 minutes in, where we stop, pack our joint, and stand on the trail to chill and talk. The forest is very alive tonight. There are always noises in the woods, but the amount of animal activity for the time was unsettling. At this point, it was probably past 1 a.m. This was strange and kind of eerie, but not alerting, as any sort of predatory animal in the area may cause a disturbance. We finish smoking and continue our walk when almost immediately the forest falls dead quiet. And as soon as the forest goes quiet, there is a voice. It almost sounds like a mocking humanoid voice, shaky and uncertain, almost like an old children's toy, like the ones with the crackly speakers and robotic voice, if you know what I mean. This immediately sets us off. We bolt directly down the opposite length of the trail, but the sound does not gain distance. It doesn't get closer per se, but no matter how far we ran down the trail, this eerie voice remains the same volume, going over and over with no quieting or stopping. At this point, I'm convinced that we are in genuine danger, something I have felt very few times. Finally, after sprinting for who knows how long, we exit the trail, gasping for breath and almost at the verge of tears of how frightening this was. We begin to exit the trail, and about 5 minutes from the exit, there is a bone-shaking, heart-stopping, murderous scream from directly behind us. I know what a mountain lion sounds like. This was not an animal. This was not someone playing or watching a movie. This scream sent birds flying from nests and made my heart drop into my stomach. It was the most genuinely depraved and violent scream that I have ever heard. This is a true story that I have only told to maybe 3 people, all of whom seem to brush it off as false. I have never been a person to push for the existence of the paranormal or spiritual, but I genuinely believe I encountered something inhuman in those woods. They then edited it and said, I know I will receive questions such as what the voice was possibly saying, or to explain the area and what happened after. I genuinely cannot remember what the voice was saying, if anything intelligible. I don't know if I could understand it then, and I certainly can't recall understanding it after several years of blocking it out of my memory. All that I recall is that it was a fluctuating voice in pitch, shaking, almost just joining sounds together. After running from the scream at the end of the trail, we ran to the car, which was only about 5 more minutes from the trail, so we got there relatively fast from sprinting. What do you guys think about this story? I genuinely, I've heard a mountain lion scream, not in person, but like, I searched it up because I listen to a lot of these stories. And if this person has heard a lot of those screams, then they're gonna know that it's different, which I think is so scary. Like, what the heck is out there? Who knows? Maybe we'll never know. We'll probably never know. But I definitely think there is something paranormal going on out there. But anyway, guys, thank you for listening. This is my first video like this. So, yeah, thank you.
My stepson keeps seeing the Hat Man. Scary story time. Hi everyone. I just wanted to share an experience that came up recently and hear some thoughts, opinions, and maybe some similar experiences. A few nights ago, I was putting my stepchildren to bed. They're young, 7 and 8 years old. Before they fell asleep, the youngest asked if he could tell me something. I told him to tell me whatever he was thinking about. He says that every once in a while he sees a giant with something on its head. He says he sometimes will see the giant at night, standing in his room near the door. By this point, I was curious and a little freaked out by what he meant by this giant, and I asked him to explain his appearance to me in as much detail as he could remember. He said the giant was a very tall-looking man that looks completely black, like a shadow, and looks to be wearing something on its head. He said it's very tall and almost reached the ceiling in his bedroom. After he described this thing, I immediately thought about the Hat Man. I'm sure most of you have heard of the Hat Man by now. If not in this sub, maybe you've seen it or heard it elsewhere. I asked him to tell me how he's feeling when he sees him, how often, and any other details he can remember. He says he normally sees the Hat Man when he starts thinking about one of his grandparents that passed away, as well as a couple of the animals that had been a part of his life throughout his childhood that have unfortunately passed away now. He said the giant, the Hat Man, sometimes speak to him, telling him he will never be good enough at various things that he is most passionate about. Honestly, this giant very much sounds like the Hat Man to me. From what I know about it, I have also experienced the Hat Man on a couple of occasions, but not often. I suffer from sleep paralysis occasionally due to my sleeping disorder. When I was going through a more challenging part of my life, I would occasionally see the Hat Man during these episodes. Since my partner and I moved into the place we live at now, we have experienced a number of strange, unexplainable activities in the house. Things fall over for no reason, objects get moved, doors open by themselves, light gets turned on and off randomly, banging on the doors coming from empty rooms. But nothing has quite given me the chills like hearing my stepson tell me he's been having a visitor. So this makes me wonder, does anyone know who or what the Hat Man is? Up until this happening, my stepkids have never heard of the Hat Man from anyone or from anywhere. Why is it that so many people have seen this entity and for the most part describe it in the same way? And that's the end of the story. So the story was found on the paranormal subreddit, and I did want to read someone's response with their own encounter of the Hat Man. And so they go on to say, I saw him when I was very young, about 8 or so, while running a high fever. I remember the Hat Man very vividly. In addition to making things worse, he was telepathically speaking to me and telling me he would basically unalive my whole family. I was so traumatized as a child, I can remember his voice to this day. It sounded like a snarl. You can imagine I was screaming my head off as a little kid. Years later, I met someone who said his father, right before he passed away, also saw the Hat Man, where he's some weird archetype or an interdimensional time traveler. Who can say? I've read he feeds off fear, and I've also read encounters that were not so menacing. I've read he also appears in the homes of unhappy mothers. One thing's for certain, my family is deeply dysfunctional and my mother has a personality disorder. Is he a generational curse or an archetype of strange danger? We might never know. So I've read one, if not two, stories on here about the Hat Man, but this is the first story that I read where he has communicated with someone. So that's a new development for me, or a new thing that I learned about the Hat Man. But that's really scary. I feel so bad for his kid to have this entity not only communicating to you, but speaking very negatively at such an impressionable age. As for the commenter's experience, you could easily want to write that off because The commenter said they were very ill and were running a really high fever. So you could chalk that up to fever dreams. Literally, when you get sick, you have the most insane dreams. So that could easily be explained away as a fever dream. But they did coincide with also having the Hat Man communicate with them and being very negative. So that, you know, take it with a grain of salt, whether that commenter really did experience the Hat Man or maybe something else. I believe they also mentioned that their parent or grandparent had also experienced the Hat Man before passing away, which I have heard that too, where people have seen the Hat Man before they pass away. And up to there, I don't remember before this story hearing the Hat Man having any conversations. It's more of like he's just there. So I don't know if he's somehow but related to maybe shadow people or things like that. Because I think the shadow people are just black, like shadow entities that appear at night, or they appear to you, but I don't think they communicate. So this is the first time I've heard of the Hat Man communicating. But yeah, back to OP's questions. What do you think the Hat Man is? And why do you think so many people have seen it? Is he a type of cryptid? What do you think? Have you experienced the Hat Man? Or do you have any extra information about the Hat Man that you would like to share? I'd love to read it in the comments below. If you have your own experiences that you love to share, you can send it to my email and I'd love to read it.
On January 7, 1355, a beautiful 29-year-old noblewoman was in the garden of a Portuguese convent with her children when 3 armed men emerged out of the shadows. While her little ones looked on with fear and confusion, the woman herself seemed to understand exactly why the men were there. She threw herself at their feet and begged for her life, for the sake of her children, for the love of their father, the Crown Prince of Portugal. But the men would not be moved. They were under strict orders, after all, orders given by the king himself. Deaf to her pleas, the men drew their swords and stabbed the woman several times before decapitating her, all while her 3 terrified children looked on and cried. Welcome back to Historical Horror. The woman at the center of this ghastly episode was Inês de Castro. She was Galician by birth, Portuguese by adoption, and depending on which chronicles you believe and which political faction was doing the chronicling, she was either the mistress of the Crown Prince Pedro of Portugal or she was his secret wife. At the time, the Kingdom of Portugal was a relatively young and fragile political entity. It had emerged from the medieval Reconquista as a distinct kingdom only in the 12th century. Ever since, it had existed in constant tension with its much larger and more powerful neighbor, Castile, the kingdom that would eventually form the political core of what would become Spain. The Portuguese royal house of Burgundy had spent generations trying to maintain independence from Castilian influence. And though marriages between the Portuguese and Castilian royal families were common and undeniably useful, such alliances were carefully monitored to ensure that the fragile balance of power was maintained. In 1340, the King of Portugal was Alfonso IV. His son and heir, the future Pedro I, was about 20 at the time, and just about to marry Constanza of Castile, in a political match arranged by his father to secure a diplomatic relationship with the important Castilian noble house of Ivrea. When Constanza arrived in Portugal in the summer of 1340, she was accompanied by her cousin and newly elevated lady-in-waiting, Inês de Castro. Inês was Galician, from the region that sits at the top of what is now northwestern Spain, a high-born, though illegitimate daughter of the powerful Castro family, one of the most politically important noble houses in Castile. She was, by every contemporary record, extraordinarily beautiful. From the moment Pedro saw his wife's beautiful cousin, he had eyes for no one else. The affair began almost immediately after Pedro and Constanza's wedding. An unfortunate start for any newlywed couple, to be sure. But this was a scenario that was far from uncommon in the annals of medieval royal marriages. In fact, a young prince's dalliance with his wife's lady-in-waiting was exactly the kind of arrangement that would have been quietly tolerated, so long as it was conducted discreetly and caused no political disturbance. Despite the fact that he was head over heels in love with another woman, Pedro's marriage to Constanza was relatively successful as far as royal unions go. The crown prince performed his marital duties, and over the 8 years of their marriage, the two produced several legitimate children, including Pedro's son and heir, the future King Fernando I. Still, contemporary accounts make it clear that the relationship between the crown prince and Inês de Castro was ruffling feathers. Constanza was upset for obvious reasons. The royal council was nervous about the potential influence of Inês's powerful Galician relatives. But perhaps most pissed off of all about the situation was Dad. King Alfonso IV heartily objected to his son's affair and made a series of unsuccessful attempts to separate the lovers. Then, in 1349, Constanza died from complications of childbirth. The young widowed Portuguese prince would naturally be expected to remarry. preferably back into the Castilian royal family. But Pedro did not want to marry another Castilian royal bride. To the dismay of his father, the royal council, and the entire Portuguese court, the crown prince declared he would marry no one but Inez. Pedro refused every marriage proposal his father tried to arrange for him. He moved Inez into his household, living openly with her as if they were man and wife. Over the next 6 years, the couple had 4 children together: Alfonso, who died in infancy, Juan, the future Duke of Valencia, Denis, and Beatriz, who would marry into the House of Trastamara and originate the line of the famed Ferdinand of Aragon. Alfonso IV was livid. He demanded the relationship come to an end and openly raged when he was disobeyed. He exiled Inez from Portugal at least twice. Each time, Pedro simply went behind his father's back to arrange for her return. The affair itself was not the problem. It was more or less expected that royal men would have extramarital affairs. And now that Pedro was a widower, he was no longer even committing adultery. What made the situation intolerable was that by the early 1350s, Inez's presence and influence at court began to look less like a harmless romantic dalliance and more like a slow-motion political takeover. The Galician Castro family was powerful, particularly because of their connections to both the royal houses of Portugal and Castile, and anxieties over their growing influence had only increased with the arrival of Inez's brothers, Alvaro and Fernando de Castro. Through their sister's privileged relationship with the Infante, the two became significant political figures at the Portuguese court. Their advice was increasingly shaping Pedro's political thinking, while their family's Castilian connections and interests were ever more present in Portuguese royal affairs. After yet another of his father's attempts to force him into a political marriage, a fed-up Pedro dropped a bombshell. He informed his father that he and Inez had been secretly married. Alfonso and his council were shocked and enraged. Though they could not conclusively disprove the claim, they refused to acknowledge the marriage. No matter, all Pedro had to do was wait until he himself became king. Indeed, the Infante made no secret of his intention to formally legitimize his children with Inez as soon as he ascended to the throne. From here, the Portuguese nobility began to circulate a specific fear. If Pedro succeeded in legitimizing Inez's children, and if young Fernando, Constanza's son and the legitimate heir, died young for any reason, Portugal would end up ruled by children whose maternal family was one of the most powerful noble houses in Castile. Portugal would, in effect, be quietly absorbed into the orbit of its greatest rival. Or else, in an attempt to prevent such an outcome, the country would be plunged into civil war. Alfonso's advisors began whispering in his ear, insisting that this was no longer a personal matter. It was a matter of national security. And because Pedro had shown himself so intractable in refusing to give up the woman he loved, there could be only one resolution to the problem. Inez de Castro had to die. At the time, Inez was living with her children at the convent of Santa Clara in Coimbra, where Pedro had safely tucked her away to avoid the wrath of his father and the Portuguese nobility. But ultimately, all of Pedro's efforts could not protect her. On January 7th, 1355, while Pedro was away on a hunting trip, the assassins Piero Coelho, Alvaro Gonçalves, and Diego López Pacheco made their way to the convent of Santa Clara. The chronicles differ slightly on how the murder itself was carried out. Some accounts say Inez was stabbed. Others say she was beheaded. Some record that she was first stabbed, then beheaded. Almost all agree that the murder happened quickly, in the presence of her children, in the convent gardens of Santa Clara a Vela. The assassins then slipped away, disappearing into the safety of Castile. When Pedro learned what his father had done, he was staggered, broken. But he did not respond with grief. He responded with war. Pedro raised forces from his own supporters and from his in-laws in Castile and marched against his father. He was quickly and soundly defeated. Father and son officially reconciled in a peace treaty signed in August of 1356, an agreement which forced Pedro to publicly forgive his father and the 3 assassins for Inez's murder. Publicly being the operative word. Personally, Pedro would never forgive, as evidenced by his later actions. Within a year, Alfonso IV was dead, and in May of 1357, Pedro I ascended to the throne of Portugal. His first political priority as king was locating the men who had killed Inez. 2 of the 3, Piero Coelho and Alvaro Gonçalves, had fled to Castile after Alfonso IV's death, understanding correctly that Pedro's ascension made them dead men. Pedro negotiated an exchange with the King of Castile. He would hand over several Castilian political fugitives who had taken refuge in Portugal, and in return, Coelho and Gonçalves would be handed over to him. The exchange was made, and the 2 men were brought to Pedro. Their punishment was carried out in public. Pedro had constructed a scaffold in front of his palace, and he had the 2 men brought to it in chains. He interrogated them personally. When they confessed, he had their hearts torn from their chests while still alive. This specific and particularly grotesque punishment was, according to contemporary accounts, deliberate. Pedro reportedly said that, as they had so callously torn his heart from him, he would return the favor. The 3rd assassin, Diego López Pacheco, was never caught. Pedro's next act was one of memorial. He at last announced to his court and to the church that he had, in fact, been secretly married to Inez de Castro for years. He named the location, Braganza, and identified a bishop and witnesses whom he claimed had been at the ceremony. The bishop and the witnesses were, by this point, all conveniently dead. Nevertheless, the church accepted his declaration. Their children were legitimized. Inez was retroactively declared to have been the legal wife of Pedro I and therefore Queen of Portugal. Following the murder, Inez had been quickly and quietly buried at the convent of Santa Clara. Her retroactive elevation meant that the woman buried in the convent cemetery in Coimbra had died as a queen, but had been buried as a commoner. Pedro intended to correct that. In 1361, he had Inez's body disinterred from the convent cemetery in Coimbra to be reburied at the monastery of Alcobaça, one of the largest and most important religious houses in Portugal. And here's where history begins to bleed into legend. The story that most people know about Inez de Castro is that of her posthumous coronation. In the centuries that followed, it was widely believed that after Pedro disinterred her body from the convent cemetery in Coimbra in 1361, he had her dressed in queenly robes, placed on a throne next to him, and forced the assembled Portuguese nobility to approach and kiss the hem of her garment, paying homage to a dead queen who had been denied that homage in life. It is a spectacular story, horrifying and beautiful in almost equal measure. It has inspired centuries of paintings, plays, poems, operas, novels. There are versions of the scene depicted in Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, and English art and literature going back to the 17th century. It also almost certainly did not happen. The story of the corpse coronation first appears in the historical record in 1577, over 200 years after Pedro's death, in a Spanish play by Geronimo Bermudez called Nis Loreda. It does not appear in any contemporary or near-contemporary chronicle of Pedro's reign. The Portuguese chroniclers who wrote about the transfer of Inez's body to Alcobaça in 1361 describe a solemn and enormously elaborate procession, but they do not describe a coronation. Modern historians of the period increasingly treat the coronation as legend rather than fact. Pedro did move Inez's body with royal honors. He did install her in the tomb he had commissioned, and he did formally declare her queen posthumously, but in the sense of legal recognition rather than physical ceremony. The legend is sensational, but the reality of what Pedro did do to honor Inez in death is arguably just as moving. Inside the church at the monastery of Alcobaça, he commissioned 2 matching tombs, carved from a single block of white limestone by the finest sculptors in the kingdom. They remain there to this day, widely considered among the finest examples of medieval funerary sculpture in Europe. And carved into the marble of each tomb are the words, Até o fim do mundo, until the end of the world. If that doesn't tug at your heartstrings, there's one more detail that might. Because there's something noteworthy about the way the tombs are positioned. Rather than the usual side-by-side arrangement, Pedro gave specific instructions that the tombs be positioned to face one another, so that, on the day of the Last Judgment, when the trumpets sound and the dead rise from their graves, the first thing he and Inez would see would be each other, and in that moment know that their love had indeed survived until the end of the world.
You got your late night snack? This is Last Thread Before Bed, episode 35. This is a little series where I read scary stories from Reddit before I go to bed, and I try not to get nightmares. So boom, let's get into it. So tonight's story is on the subreddit Real Ghost Stories from user Alex_UWU03. And this story is titled My Haunting Experiences from My Childhood Home. Hi, I know this might not sound true or scary, but experiencing it yourself is terrifying. For context, we have a terraced house, so our house and our neighbors' houses are together. It's a 2-story high, 2 rooms upstairs, living room, kitchen, bathroom, and laundry room. When walking up to the house, you will go through the patio, where you'll go past the living room window and to our door. We had a few windows in the whole house, but they're in almost all normal human height from outside, so people can stare in. Anyways, that is what I would describe our house like. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied there, but I digress. I grew up in that house, so I only know most of these stories from my parents. Thinking about it now, it's giving me goosebumps. So I was around 3 to 4 years old and I was outside the house playing. My mom suddenly noticed that I was giggling a lot and it sounded like I was talking to someone. We know everyone in town, so she didn't think too much of it. When she went outside for a quick smoke, she could see me from the patio, but she couldn't see the person I was talking to. So she called me over to her, asking who I was talking to. I told her I was talking to an old man and that he wanted to come inside and play with me and my toys. She thought I was talking to an imaginary friend. So she said yes, that he could, not knowing she'd invited a not friendly phenomenon into our house. Buckle up, y'all. This sounds like it's about to get crazy. Because this old guy was not friendly at all. As a kid, I didn't know it, but when I grew older, I could tell he wasn't just an imaginary friend, he was an evil spirit. He would knock on our doors and windows, knock things down or move them around. He was the reason I couldn't walk down our stairs forward, only backward. He would push me down the stairs and make loud thumping sounds down or up the stairs. When I was 12 years old, we started sleeping in our living room for 2 to 3 years because the old guy stayed upstairs in our bedrooms. I remember I had a lot of sleep paralysis up in my bedroom where the old guy was scaring me, walking slowly towards me. He had really dark eyes, almost black, around 60 to 70 years old, open mouth, and had a raspy old voice. He didn't say much, but when he did, in short sentences. I think they meant to say he didn't say much, but when he did, he spoke in short sentences. I literally don't read these. I'd read these with you guys, so I can't remember them, but I know he wanted to tell me something. You'll understand at the end of my story. I remember one thing from when we slept in our living room. I had an out-of-body experience. I was watching me and my parents sleeping. Suddenly I noticed a shadow at our kitchen door, and I noticed it was looking at my mom. Then I noticed that my mom had sleep paralysis, but this time it wasn't the old guy she saw, but a demon with a long cloak, and it was holding chains in its hands. It swung them like a lasso and threw it at my mom's feet. Holy shit! The chains locked to my mom's feet, and my mom couldn't do anything but watch it, trying to scream. The demon started to pull my mom off the couch, and she just lay motionless. As soon as she hit the floor, she could finally scream, and woke up my dad and me. She couldn't talk, and my dad was so confused, so I told him what I saw, and we called the priest to cleanse our house. My mom couldn't walk on her feet for over a week after that experience. When we were going to move to Denmark from our home city, we had to get our boxes from the attic, and as we were getting them down, we found a picture of the old man. Y'all are in his house. We quickly found our Bible and we said prayers, burned the picture, and I just felt at peace. I knew he was trying to tell me something, but I still never know why. Later I found out that the old guy was my friend's grandpa, who died years ago, but he lived in the house before us. I go visit his grave whenever I'm in our old city. I don't know why I wrote it here, just haven't told many about this. Has anyone experienced something like this? Thanks for reading. I loved this story, y'all. This was a really good one. And honestly, it is pretty convincing. Like, this does not sound too crazy. Let me know what you guys think. Follow for more scary stories.
She begged her friends to stop beating her for 30 minutes straight, but they continued to do so anyways while filming the whole thing. On the evening of March 30th, 2008, a 16-year-old girl named Victoria Lindsay, who everyone called Tori, was hanging out at the beach when suddenly she had gotten a message from one of her friends telling her that she needed to come home immediately. Now, normally, home would have meant her parents' house, but just a week earlier, Tori had gotten into this huge argument with her mom, and things had gotten so bad that Tori had moved out and started staying with one of her friends, a 17-year-old girl named Mercedes Nichols, who lived with her grandmother in Highland City, Florida. Now, things between Tori and Mercedes had not exactly been perfect. They had been arguing because Tori had borrowed Mercedes' hairbrush and razor without asking. There was another disagreement over about $4 in gas money, and on top of all of those petty grudges, the girls had been sending each other really angry text messages and posting things back and forth on MySpace. But I mean, none of this was like life-threatening betrayal or something. It was just petty high school drama between two girls. So when Tori got the text saying that she needed to come home quickly, she probably thought that they were just gonna talk things out. But the moment that she got inside and into the bedroom, Mercedes suddenly appeared.
Bro! What's going on around?
Appeared with 5 other girls who had apparently been waiting in different rooms. And the second they came out, all the girls surrounded Tori and started screaming at her. They were yelling about things that she had supposedly said, threatening her and demanding that she had to admit everything that they believed she'd done. And before Tori could even understand why all these girls are here surrounding her, one of the girls, April Cooper, stepped forward and punched her in the face. Tori immediately put her hands up and tried to protect her head, but then another girl named Brittany Hardcastle joined in and started punching her over and over again until she fell onto the bed. And within seconds, the rest of the girls joined them. Tori was being hit from different directions, and every time she tried to turn her body to protect herself from one person, somebody else came on the other side and started doing something else to her. And then sometime during all of this struggle, Brittany grabbed Tori and slammed her into the bedroom wall so hard that everything went black. Tori lost consciousness. When she finally woke back up, she was somehow sitting on the couch in the living room, and Tori had no idea how she had gotten there. Her head was pounding from being driven into a wall. Her vision was already starting to blur, and when she looked around, there were 6 teenage girls standing around the couch in this semicircle, and all of them were just staring directly at her. Some were standing near the walls, others were right beside the couch, and someone was standing in front of the doorway so that Tori couldn't run away. And a few feet in front of her, one of the girls was holding a camera and pointing it directly at her. Tori had barely opened her eyes when one of the girls stepped forward and started hitting her again. Then that girl moved out of the way and another one came in, and that's when they started taking turns. One girl would walk over toward Tori, punch her several times, and then move back so that somebody else could move forward and do the same exact thing to her. Tori pushed herself farther into the corner of the couch, brought both her arms up over her head, and just tried to make herself feel as small as possible. She was crying, she was screaming for them to stop. Blood was running down her entire face, but they just kept on coming. Even after their own knuckles were covered in Tori's blood, they continued hitting her. They screamed at her to fight back. They taunted her and told them to hit them back, but every time Tori tried to stand up from the couch, one of the girls shoved her back down and started punching her again. At one point, Brittany stopped and looked down at her own hands just to see that her knuckles were bleeding from how many times she had just hit Tori. But instead of seeing that blood and realizing, whoa, this has gone way too far, Brittany looked down at Tori, who was shaking and just breathing uncontrollably, and said, "You think your lip is busted? Wait till I bust your nose too." Then she raised her fist and started hitting Tori again and again and again, just repeatedly. At some point during the attack, one of the boys who was in front of the house on lookout warned the girls that they were being way too loud and that the neighbors might hear them. And you would think that hearing that kind of warning would make at least one person inside of that room finally stop and realize what they were doing. But Mercedes, while sitting very comfortably on the couch watching her friend getting beaten, looked at the girls and said, "You don't have to stop beating her. Just quiet down." And like little puppets, the girls did as instructed. They lowered their voices and continued. For roughly 30 to 35 minutes, Tori remained trapped inside of that room while the girls punched her in the head, the face, and across the rest of her body. And every time Tori finally thought it was ending, another girl moved toward her and continued attacking. Blood was pouring out of Tori's nose and mouth. One of her eyes had started turning black and purple. The left side of her face started swelling. Her vision was becoming blurry, and because Tori had already been knocked unconscious once, she could barely keep track of what was going on around her. But there was one thought that she just couldn't let go of, something that was stuck in her head. They are going to kill me. Eventually, after more than half an hour, the beatings finally started slowing down. But it wasn't because they cared or anything. No. It was because Mercedes' grandma was about to be done with work, but they still weren't going to let Tori just walk outside the house. Instead, Mercedes, Brittany Mays, and Brittany Hardcastle forced her into a car and drove away from the neighborhood. And as Tori sat there, bruised, bleeding, and barely even able to think straight, she had no idea where they were taking her, or if something even worse was about to happen. But eventually, Tori looked out of the window and realized the car had pulled into the parking lot of a CVS. And before pushing her out of the car, the girls warned her that if she were to ever go to the police and tell anybody what happened, they would find her and give her an even worse beating than the one that she had just survived. Then one of the girls called another teenager named Kelly and told her to go to the CVS and pick Tori up. But before hanging up, she gave Kelly one strange warning. Don't let her lie to you. She didn't get jumped. Kelly had no idea what she meant until she turned onto that parking lot and saw Tori. She was standing there shaking uncontrollably and crying, and her body was just filled with all of these bruises. She looked helpless. So Kelly hurried toward her, helped her into the car, and started looking over her injuries, assessing if she needed to go to the hospital or something. Like there was just no way in hell that she was gonna believe Tori had not gotten jumped, or at least been in a horrible attack. There was a huge knot near her left eye, which had already turned black and purple. Blood was covering her mouth and her face. face. One of her teeth was broken, and Tori looked so dazed that she could barely even speak. Kelly drove her back to her house, and as soon as the adults there saw the condition that Tori was in, they immediately called 911. And at some point, paramedics arrived and rushed Tori to the hospital. And once doctors began examining her, they realized that her injuries were much worse than they had looked from the outside. Tori had suffered a concussion from all the blows to her head. Her left eye had been injured so badly that her vision was affected. Her left ear had also been badly damaged, causing problems with her hearing, and the bruising that was all over her body was so severe that doctors had to admit her into intensive care. While Tori was lying inside the hospital trying to recover, police had already gotten their hands on the video that the girls had filmed inside the house, and once detectives watched the video, they were disgusted. The footage showed Tori curled up on the couch while different girls stepped forward and hit her one after another. It showed her trying to protect her head, and it showed that this had not been some quick fight that ended after a few punches. Polk County Sheriff Grady Judge described what happened inside of that house almost like an animalistic attack. He said that the teenagers showed almost no remorse when they were first questioned, so he pushed for all 8 of them to be charged as adults. 6 girls were arrested along with the 2 boys accused of acting as lookouts. The sheriff's office eventually released 3 minutes of the beating video, and almost instantly it was everywhere. News stations played it on the television, people reposted it online, and at one point 6 of the 20 most watched videos on YouTube were connected to Tori's attack. Which, if you really think about it, that's honestly like one of the darkest parts. These girls filmed themselves beating Tori up because they wanted the video to go viral, and even after they were arrested, it became exactly the spectacle that they wanted. At the end of the day though, everybody who saw Tori curled up on that couch had the exact same reaction: please lock them up. But out of the 8 teenagers that were originally arrested, only one of them had spent time in jail. Brittany Hardcastle, the girl who repeatedly punched Tori and slammed her head into the wall hard enough to knock her unconscious. She pleaded guilty to battery and false imprisonment, and she was sentenced to 15 days in jail. 15 days. That is disgusting, to say the least. The other girls mostly received probation and community service, while the charges against the 2 boys were eventually dropped because there wasn't enough evidence to prove that they had taken any part in the attack. I'm sure that it's not the justice that her family would have wanted, but I truly hope that Tori today is doing well. And if she ever sees this, just know that your story has truly saved so many boys and girls from entering a situation that could have cost them their lives. That is all that I have for today. I love you guys. Mwah. Please be safe out there. Group hug.